Hello, and welcome back to Speak English Daily.
Hi, everyone. We are very happy to see you here today.
Hey, everyone. Welcome back to Speak English Daily. I'm Anna, and I'm here with Mike. If you enjoy learning useful English through real conversations, make sure you subscribe and stay with us, because today's phrase is one you will hear all the time in everyday English. Mike, you look like you have something on your mind.
I do, actually, and I think I made another small English mistake yesterday.
Another one?
Yes, but this one really confused me. I was talking to a friend, and after a few minutes, he said, "I want to bring something up."
And what did you think he meant?
Well, I thought he wanted me to bring something. So I looked around and thought, bring what? From where? I was ready to get up and find something.
That's actually a very understandable mistake.
Then he started talking about a problem he had at work, and I just stood there thinking, why did he tell me to bring something if he doesn't want anything?
I can see the confusion, but in that sentence, he wasn't talking about carrying something from one place to another. He was using a very common phrasal verb, bring up.
So bring up doesn't always mean physically bring something to a higher place?
Right. When we say bring up in a conversation, it often means to start talking about a topic.
So if I say, I want to bring something up, I'm really saying, I want to talk about something.
Yes, maybe you have a question, a problem, an idea, or something you have been thinking about. You can say, "Can I bring something up?"
That's much clearer now. So if I have a question about our plans, I could say, can I bring up a question?
You could, although in everyday English, "Can I bring up something?" or "Can I bring up a question?" both work depending on what you want to say. You are telling the other person that you want to introduce something into the conversation.
I think I've heard this without noticing it. Someone might say, she brought up the weather, right?
Exactly. Maybe everyone was sitting quietly and she started talking about the weather. You can say, "She brought up the weather."
Or if my friend has a new plan, I could say, he brought up an interesting idea.
Yes, and notice something important. We often put the thing after bring up. Bring up a topic, bring up a question, bring up an idea, bring up a problem.
What if I don't want to repeat the noun? Can I just say, bring it up?
Absolutely. For example, if you have something you want to discuss with your manager, I might say, "If it's bothering you, bring it up."
So bring it up means start talking about it.
That's it. And this little phrase can be very useful when you don't know how to start a conversation.
I can already imagine using it. If I need to talk to my roommate about something, I could say, I need to bring something up with you.
That's a very natural sentence. But now I'm curious, Mike. What was the thing your friend actually wanted to talk about?
That's the funny part. It was a problem with another coworker, and he had been thinking about it for several days. He finally decided it was time to bring it up. And honestly, I think that's where this phrase gets even more interesting, because sometimes bringing something up isn't easy at all.
You're right. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't knowing what to say. It's finding the courage to bring the problem in the first place.
And that's a conversation I definitely need to tell you about.
I know that feeling. Sometimes you have something to say, but you don't know how to introduce it naturally. You don't want to suddenly change the conversation and make everyone wonder why you're talking about it.
Yes, and that happens all the time. Actually, that reminds me of this weekend. My friends and I were trying to decide what to do on Saturday, and everyone had a different idea.
That sounds familiar. What did you want to do?
I wanted to go somewhere outside the city, but nobody had made a real plan yet. Then Sarah brought up the idea of going to the beach.
So she introduced that idea into the conversation.
Right. She just said, what if we go to the beach? Later, I could say, Sarah brought up the idea of going to the beach.
And that's a very natural use of bring up. You can use it when someone introduces a new subject, suggestion, or idea into a conversation.
So if we're talking about dinner and I suddenly say, "What about pizza?" I've brought up the idea of pizza.
Yes, you could say, Mike brought up pizza. Or if you want to be more specific, Mike brought up the idea of getting pizza.
I like that. It feels a little different from just saying, "We talked about pizza."
It is. Talk about tells us you discussed a subject. Bring up often focuses on the moment when someone introduces that subject.
So if we're talking about our weekend and I suddenly say, "Should we book a hotel?" I've brought up the hotel.
Right, and you could say, I wanted to bring up our weekend plans.
That sounds like something you say when you want everyone to stop for a moment and listen.
That's often the feeling. You're gently telling people, there's something I want us to discuss.
It can be used for work too, right?
Definitely. Imagine we're talking about our jobs and you want to discuss your schedule. You could say, I wanted to bring up my work schedule.
Or maybe I want to talk about money with a friend. I could say, "Can I bring up something about the money we spent?"
Yes, money can be a little uncomfortable, so using a gentle introduction can make the conversation easier.
I like that. You don't just suddenly start talking about money, you prepare the other person a little.
Exactly. You can also say, I wanted to bring something up. Then the other person knows you're about to introduce a subject.
And the subject doesn't have to be serious. We can bring up fun things too.
Of course, you could say, she brought up a really interesting topic at lunch.
Or Tom brought up his travel plans while we were eating.
Yes, and if you're planning a trip, someone might say, we should bring up the travel plans before everyone leaves.
So the idea is not simply talking, it's bringing a subject into the conversation.
That's a useful way to think about it. And there's a small grammar pattern learners should remember. We can say, bring up the topic, bring up the idea, or bring up the problem.
And if I don't want to repeat the noun, I can say, bring it up.
Right. For example, I need to bring up the problem with my manager. If we already know what the problem is, we can say, I need to bring it up with my manager.
Let me check something. Is I need to bring up it with my manager correct?
No, with the pronoun it, the natural order is bring it up. So remember the pattern, bring it up.
That's actually easy to remember because I hear bring it up quite often in movies and conversations.
And you can use the same pattern with them. For example, there are two questions. I'll bring them up later.
So the noun can come after bring up, but a pronoun like it comes between bring and up.
That's right.
Okay, let's test this with a real situation. Imagine our friends are planning a holiday, but nobody has talked about where we're going yet. What could I say?
That's your challenge for everyone listening, too. I'd say, I wanted to bring up our holiday plans. Where should we go?
Very natural. And you don't need complicated English. A simple phrase like that can help you start a conversation.
I can see why native speakers use it so much. It gives you an easy way to introduce something without making the conversation feel too sudden. And sometimes what you bring up is easy to discuss, but sometimes you're bringing up something that could make another person uncomfortable.
Like a problem with a coworker, a roommate, or a friend.
Right, and that's where this phrase gets even more interesting, because sometimes the hardest part isn't knowing what to say, it's finding the courage to bring the subject at all.
You know, that reminds me of something that happened to me at work a few months ago. There was a small problem with our schedule, and one of my coworkers kept arriving late for an important meeting.
Every time?
Not every time, but often enough that it started causing problems for everyone else. We had to wait for him, and sometimes we couldn't start the meeting on time.
That sounds frustrating. Did you talk to him about it?
Not at first. I kept thinking, maybe he'll notice and change. But after a few weeks, I realized I needed to bring it up.
So here, bring it up means you needed to talk about the problem.
Right. I didn't want to ignore it anymore, but I also didn't want to make him feel bad.
That's the difficult part. When you bring up a problem, you have to think about how the other person might feel.
Exactly. You can have a problem with something, but that doesn't mean you want to start an argument.
I understand that. I had a similar situation with a roommate. He was a nice guy, but he almost never cleaned the kitchen.
Oh, that's dangerous territory.
It really was. I would clean it, then 2 days later, there would be dirty plates everywhere again.
Did you bring it up?
I wanted to, but I kept waiting. Every time I saw the kitchen, I thought, I need to bring this up with him. But then we'd start talking about something else and I'd forget about it. Or maybe you didn't forget. Maybe you just didn't want the uncomfortable conversation.
That's probably closer to the truth. I didn't want him to think I was angry with him.
That's very common. Sometimes we avoid a small conversation because we imagine it will become a big problem.
So eventually, what did you do?
I finally said, "Hey, can I bring something up?" Then I explained the situation calmly.
And how did he react?
He actually understood. He said he hadn't realized how often I was cleaning the kitchen. We agreed that we would take turns.
So you didn't need a big argument. You just needed to bring the problem up.
Right. And notice another useful expression, bring something up with someone.
So if I have a problem at work, I can say, I need to bring this up with my manager.
Yes, that means you need to discuss the problem with your manager.
And if a student has a problem with a teacher, the student could say, I need to bring this up with my teacher.
Exactly. Or imagine you ordered food at a restaurant and something is wrong with your order.
I could tell the server, I'd like to bring this up with the manager.
You could, although in that situation, I'd like to speak to the manager about this, might sound more natural. But the important idea is still there. You want to discuss a problem with a specific person.
That's interesting. So bring up doesn't always sound angry.
Not at all. Your voice and the situation matter. I need to bring this up can sound serious, but it can also be calm and polite.
What about money? Suppose I lent a friend some money and they haven't returned it yet.
That's another uncomfortable situation.
I might say, I need to bring up the money you borrowed.
Yes, though you could make it softer by saying, I wanted to bring up the money we talked about. Then you can explain what you need.
I think the phrase is useful because it gives you a way to open the conversation. You don't have to explain everything in the first sentence.
That's the key. I need to bring this up tells the other person there is something important I want to talk about. Then you can explain the details calmly.
And sometimes you feel nervous before saying it.
Definitely. You might think, what if they get angry? What if they misunderstand me? But avoiding a problem doesn't always make it disappear.
That's what I learned with my roommate. I finally brought it up, and the conversation was much easier than I expected. We made a cleaning schedule, and our kitchen became a much happier place.
So sometimes a simple conversation can solve a problem before it becomes a bigger one.
And now, when something is bothering me, I don't just sit there thinking about it for 3 weeks. I ask myself what needs to be said, how I can say it calmly, and whether it's time to bring it up.
There's another situation where bring up can have a slightly different feeling, and you hear it a lot in movies, shows, and everyday conversations. It happens when someone starts talking about something from the past.
Something from the past, so like an old memory?
Yes, maybe someone tells an old story, mentions something you did years ago, or starts talking about an old disagreement. For example, she brought up something I said last year.
So she started talking about something I said a long time ago.
Right. Maybe you don't mind talking about it. You could simply listen and say, "Oh, I remember that."
But I can imagine another situation where someone brings up the past and you're not very happy about it.
Definitely. Imagine two friends are having dinner and one person suddenly mentions an old argument.
The other person might say, "Why are you bringing that up again?"
Exactly. In that sentence, the speaker sounds annoyed. They don't really want to talk about the old problem again.
So the words are the same, but the feeling changes.
Yes, bring up itself isn't an angry phrase. The emotion comes from the situation and the way you say it. For example, she brought up an old story from school sounds completely normal.
But why are you bringing that up again sounds like please stop talking about this.
That's right. And you might hear, he brought up our old argument.
That sounds uncomfortable.
It can be, but sometimes bringing up the past can be positive too. Maybe you're with an old friend and they bring up a funny memory from school.
Like, do you remember when we got lost on that school trip?
Exactly. You might laugh and say, I can't believe you brought that up.
In that case, I'm surprised, but I'm not angry.
Right. Context matters.
I think that's something English learners need to notice. We can't always understand a phrase just by translating it.
That's an important point. The same expression can sound friendly, neutral, serious, or annoyed, depending on the conversation.
Can we talk about a couple of mistakes learners make with bring up?
Sure. Let's imagine you're talking about something you want to discuss tomorrow. How would you say it?
I want to bring up it tomorrow.
There it is. We need one small change. Say, I want to bring it up tomorrow.
Right, the pronoun goes in the middle.
Yes. Now try another one. You want to say that someone started talking about a problem.
She brought up about the problem.
We don't need about there. Say, she brought up the problem.
So we can say talk about the problem, but with bring up, we say bring up the problem.
Exactly. That's a useful comparison. Talk about is more general. It simply tells us that someone discussed a subject.
And bring up often tells us that someone introduced the subject into the conversation.
Right. Imagine Anna and Mike are talking about their weekend. If I say, we talked about our weekend plans, I mean we discussed them. But if I say, Mike brought up our weekend plans, I'm focusing on the moment when you introduced that subject.
So talk about describes the conversation, while bring up often describes how a new subject enters the conversation.
Yes, and that little difference can help you understand native speakers much better.
Let me try one more. If my friend suddenly starts talking about an old vacation, I can say, she brought up our trip from 5 years ago.
Perfect. And if I suddenly start talking about an old mistake you made, you might look at me and say,
why are you bringing that up again?
And I would probably laugh and say, because it's still funny.
Well, now I'm beginning to understand why context matters so much. Bring up can introduce a new idea, a problem, or even an old memory, and the feeling can change depending on the situation.
Mike, we still haven't decided what we're doing for Emma's birthday next weekend.
I know, we said we'd organize something small, but somehow we haven't organized anything.
Then let's start now. First, where should we have it?
I was thinking about having dinner at that new restaurant downtown.
That sounds good. Did you check the prices?
Not yet.
Then we probably need to bring up the budget before we make a reservation.
Good point. We don't want to choose a place and then discover that nobody can afford it.
Exactly. We can decide how much each person wants to spend and then choose a restaurant.
I can bring up the budget in our group chat tonight.
Good. And we also need to think about the schedule. Some people finish work late.
I'll bring up the schedule too. Maybe we can ask everyone what time works for them.
That should be easy.
Well, there is one small problem.
What happened?
Jake said yesterday that he might not be able to come.
Why not?
He has to work that evening, but he wasn't sure about the time.
Then we should bring up the problem with him before we book anything.
I agree. I'll send him a message.
What are you going to say?
Maybe, hey Jake, can you let us know what time you finish work? We're planning Emma's birthday dinner.
That's good. You don't have to make it complicated.
I have another idea. What if we have lunch instead of dinner?
That's actually better for me.
Great, then I'll bring up the idea in the group chat.
And this is a good example of how people use bring up naturally. You're not talking about a problem this time. You're introducing a new idea.
Right. I can already imagine someone replying, that's a good idea.
Or someone might say, I don't think lunch will work for me.
Then we'll have another problem to solve.
That's life.
There is something else I need to tell you.
What is it?
Do you remember the birthday dinner we tried to organize last year?
Oh no, why are you bringing that up again?
Because we made the same mistake. We waited too long to ask everyone.
Fair point. Last year, half the group didn't know the plan until the day before.
And then everyone was calling each other.
I remember. One person arrived at the wrong restaurant.
And another person thought dinner started an hour later.
Please don't bring up that story.
But it's a good reminder.
It is, and now we can avoid the same problem.
So let's make a simple plan. I'll bring up the budget and lunch idea in the group chat.
I'll bring up the schedule.
And I'll talk to Jake about his work time.
Good. What about the restaurant?
I found 2 places. I'll send them to everyone and ask which one they prefer.
Perfect. We have a plan.
Wait, one more thing.
What now?
We haven't decided who is bringing the cake.
That's true.
Should I bring it up in the group chat?
Yes, but don't volunteer yourself before someone else offers.
Too late. I was already thinking about it.
Then maybe you should bring it up.
Fine. I'll say, who can bring the cake?
And if nobody answers?
Then I'll bring it.
That's very kind of you.
I know. I was hoping someone else would say it first.
Well, at least now we have everything out in the open. We brought up the budget, the schedule, Jake's problem, the lunch idea, the cake, and even that terrible dinner from last year.
And this time we're talking about all of it before the day of the party.
Which is probably the best lesson here. When something needs to be discussed, sometimes you just need to bring it up.
And when you have several things to discuss, don't wait until the last minute. Bring up the important things, listen to everyone, and make a simple plan.
I think Emma is going to have a good birthday.
I hope so. And if something goes wrong, at least we'll have another funny story to bring up next year.
Mike, after all that planning, I think we should tell everyone about the trip you organized last month. You had quite a day.
I did. I thought organizing a simple weekend trip would be easy, but by the morning we were supposed to leave, there were already 3 problems.
What happened first?
The hotel called me and said they had a problem with our reservation. They had our booking, but one of the rooms wasn't available anymore.
That must have been stressful.
It was. I didn't want to worry everyone immediately, so I called the hotel again and tried to understand what had happened. Then I realized I needed to bring up the hotel problem with my friends because we had to make a decision.
What did they say?
Everyone stayed calm, which helped. One friend found another hotel nearby, and another friend called the original hotel to ask about a different room.
So you brought up the problem and everyone helped find a solution.
Right, but that wasn't the only thing. A few minutes later, Sarah brought up the budget.
Oh, that's always an important conversation.
She said, before we change hotels, can we check the price? We looked at the new hotel, and fortunately, it wasn't much more expensive.
Good. Then what happened?
We had agreed to meet at 9 in the morning, but 2 people were still asleep, so I had to bring up the meeting time again.
What did you say?
I sent a message saying, are we still meeting at 9? We need to leave soon.
That sounds simple and clear.
It worked. Everyone got ready, but then Jake called me and said he was going to arrive late.
How late?
About an hour.
So you had another conversation to have.
Yes, I needed to bring it up with the group because changing the departure time would affect everyone.
Did everyone agree to wait?
Not at first. 2 people wanted to leave on time, but another friend said Jake had never been late before and was probably having a real problem.
That sounds like a difficult decision.
It was. Then Sarah brought up something from the past. She reminded us that last year we had left without another friend, and that person had been really upset.
So she brought up an old problem that everyone had forgotten about.
Well, we hadn't forgotten. We just didn't want to talk about it.
Sometimes people avoid old problems because they don't want another uncomfortable conversation.
That's what happened. But this time, talking about it actually helped. We decided to wait for Jake, and he arrived 20 minutes later.
So the trip finally started.
Yes, and after all those conversations, the rest of the weekend was wonderful.
That's a good example of why bring up is such a useful phrase. You can bring up a simple topic, like a plan. You can bring up a problem when something needs attention. You can bring up an idea when you have a suggestion.
You can also bring something up with someone. For example, I need to bring this up with my manager.
And finally, you can bring up something from the past, like an old story, memory, or problem.
So the phrase looks simple, but it gives you many useful ways to talk about real conversations.
And you don't need difficult English to use it. You can start with a very simple sentence. Can I bring something up?
Or, I wanted to bring up an idea.
Or, I need to bring this up with you.
Now it's your turn. What's something you would like to bring up with a friend, coworker, or family member? Try to write one sentence in the comments using bring up.
And don't worry if your sentence isn't perfect. The important thing is to practice using the phrase in a real situation.
That's what speaking English is about. You don't need perfect English to bring something up. You just need a simple sentence, a little confidence, and the courage to start the conversation. Thanks for learning with us today, and we'll see you in the next conversation. Bye, everyone.